Welcome to Chapter 11. Chapter 11 is about the intersection of working and family, which are oftentimes seen as kind of at odds with each other. It's like, oh, I want to be a great parent, but oh, I have to go to work, and therefore all my time and energy are sucked up into work. But I have to be a worker in order to provide for my family. So I guess they're like bedfellows that are at odds oftentimes with each other, especially among the working class people. The middle class and the rich have a lot more flexibility and a lot more ability to create their job that works well for their family. Those that are working class and lower class, oftentimes there's a lot more conflict and a lot more difficulty trying to mend those two things together. So let's go ahead and get started. A chapter outline. We will be talking about working in these institutional arenas that we call work and the family. We'll talk about housework and childcare. We'll talk about how are we going to solve this issue that I mentioned where there's not enough hours in the day to be both a good worker and a good parent. What can we do to try to solve those? And then the last thing is we'll look at what some areas, some people, some I guess local, like New York City, is doing to try to help with these situations. All right, so we'll talk about work as an institutional. An institution is a large group of people, oftentimes is multiple organizations that work to accomplish a task. So we could talk about work is try to accomplish something, and we'll talk about these three types of work. One, I typically think market work. When I think about work, I'm like, I'm going somewhere or I'm going to work remotely to do something for my boss that they're going to pay me for. We call that market work. But maybe you're also doing dishes and you're cleaning the oven. That would be under housework. Whereas care work is the changing diapers, the helping people to get their, like their lunch together to go to school and learn. You're caring for grandma in her house. That's care work. Usually, traditionally, this got paid. The housework and the care work did not, but since women are joining the market so much more, these have become part of market work for some people. Like we've professionalized them for people. So, all right, moving on. Modern families have to face a lot of decisions around work in terms of how do you divide up housework and care work. The old model that we had for, I don't know, a couple hundred years, not forever, was where women did the care work and the housework and the men did the market work. But now that women are doing market work, what about men? They should be picking up the slack, right? Because we value equality and we say, hey, things are supposed to be equal here. So if women are working, then women are working for pay, then men should also be doing dishes and changing diapers. When does it make sense to pay for somebody to come into the home and do the housework that the other people don't want to do? And for instance, if you're a lawyer and you could spend an extra half hour at work and then pay somebody to clean your house for a whole hour, if you don't like doing house cleaning, then maybe that makes sense. Or when do you tell one partner, usually the mother, that it would actually be better for her to stay at home because if she goes to work, we're basically going to be paying the like we're paying for her to go to work because maybe there's three kids and two of them have to be in daycare and the third one has behavior problems at school. So the mom is constantly leaving work to go attend to that child and pick that child up from school anyway. And so it may be that most of your money is going to the child care facility anyway, and so it may make sense to just say, you know what, until these two kids are in school, why doesn't one partner, again, usually mother, because usually mom's making less money, stay home and care for the kids? As a whole, the family has given the work to the market. Okay, over the last 100 years, actually probably less than that, probably the last 40 years, more and more housework and more childcare has moved to the market, meaning it's moved out of the family and into the marketplace. In fact, that's like just almost everything, not almost everything, so many things have moved to the marketplace. Like our entertainment, our food service, the way that we, I don't know, socialize has moved to the market. So, all right, let's talk about paid work. Realize that men were not always being paid to work. Really, men left the home in the 19th and 20th centuries. That means the 1800s and the 1900s to go work for pay. That left women isolated at home, oftentimes doing care and housework. However, since the 1960s, the number of women working outside the home has risen very quickly, and they're being paid, obviously. Most women, two-thirds, now have less time for intensive childcare. Most women are working. In fact, we have more women workers in the US economy than we do male workers. That doesn't leave much time for intensive childcare, right? It's hard to be an intense mother and intense, or even just a worker, right? This is oftentimes leaves a lot of people in a situation where they feel like they're robbing Peter to pay Paul. They just feel like there's not enough hours in the day. You can't do both, and they feel guilty and bad about this. Women's entry into paid work has deeply affected modern families. It's changed who's at home when the kids get home. It's also brought a lot of money into the home where our homes are bigger and our vacations are more lavish and we're eating out more often than we used to, and we're bringing more housekeepers into our homes, and we're a lot of things. We're emphasizing to young girls that they need to go to college, from a very young age, whereas in the past we would not have emphasized that, probably to either gender actually, but especially not to little girls. But now that mom's in the workforce, she's leading by example. I'm going to work. Daughter, you should also go to work, even if that's not even being spoken out loud. It's inferred. The percentage of mothers in the labor force, even when they have young children. Okay, so let's look at the youngest age, the 0 to 2 here. In 1950, only 10% of women who had infants and young children were in the workforce. Today, it is over 60%, almost 70%. Let's look at women who have children between the ages of 10 and 17. In 1950, 35% of them were in the labor force. Today, it is 80%. So, a doubling, sometimes more than doubling. In fact, this is a 7x, the youngest group. Okay, so a lot of women, even women with young children, are in the labor force. And of course, once you get used to that lifestyle, it's very hard to go backward. Occupational segregation. Women are now working outside the home in every job, but a lot of women are doing what they did inside the home. They're doing similar activities. And the thought is that society said to women, okay, you can work outside the home, but you just need to do the same things that you were doing inside the home. So this is referred to as occupational gender segregation, where they have women's jobs and you have men's jobs. Women's jobs would be like serving food, kind of like they did at home, cleaning houses, kind of like they did at home, right? Bandaging wounds, kind of like they did at home, right? And then men are, police officers and insurance salesmen and things like that. And that shows up still in the home when you look at the activities that the different genders are doing in the home. Women are doing more dishes and window washing, and men are doing more trash and outside lawn mowing and things like that. This chart here supports the argument of the previous slide, which is that if you look at if you look at professions that are dominated by women, they're professions that women were kind of doing in the home before they were being paid. Childcare, maid, personal aid, laundry, that sort of thing, and they're being dominated, and they're typically very low paying jobs as well. Here's my theory on that. We've been paying men to work for about 200 years, since the 1800s, and we've only been paying women for 70 years in large numbers. And so I think that's why we don't pay them very much, because we're just like society isn't used to it. I don't know. That's like the nicest way of putting it, I guess. I guess that's the thing I can come up with that makes us not sound like complete jerks. Housework and childcare. Let's look at how women and men are spending their time a little bit differently. So over the past few decades, women have increased their independence. They're able to live lives separate from men. There's more respect being separate from men. They're going to school on their own, choosing careers that make sense to them, and then making money, which brings them a lot of independence and power in relationships. Men's employment patterns haven't changed much in the past few decades. I have this theory that because men are not dominating education anymore, that a lot of men are getting out. I don't know. I heard that the other day, and I was like, "Oh, that's interesting to think about." Like that's the reason why women are now in education so much more. If you go to your average college campus, it's 70% women, maybe 65, something like that. And I think it's maybe because men are saying like, well, we're having to compete with women and other groups, and I don't know that it's like they don't want to compete with. All right, let's move on. So couples face a challenging in balancing work, house care, and child care. Think about it like this. If in the 1950s the man was going to work and the woman was staying home, then they were able to do both work and home. But now that they're both at work, it leaves a lot of work to do after your paid job, after your market work. You have a lot of child care, you have a lot of housework, you have a lot of care work afterward, and that's very difficult because you've only got so much energy and so many hours in the day, and you need to sleep some of that time. So women still do the majority of childcare and housework, even when they're working for pay. This is referred to as a second shift. And so women are going to work, men are going to work, and then afterward, the kids need help, the dishes need to be done, dinner needs to be cooked, and women are still doing the majority of that. And so that is referred to her as her second shift. Some people will talk about women having a third shift, and that is the emotional care. So when the teenager comes home because, the boyfriend that she was hoping to get doesn't want to be her boyfriend, and there's this there's this emotional pain that she's experiencing, she will most of the time go to mom for that. And so mom's on her third shift now with that care. In a typical day in 2021, this is how men and women are spending their time. So men are over here on the left, women are over here on the right. The blue is job. Okay, so let's see how these line up. So one, men are working more for pay anyway. What about, I don't know, 2 hours more, about 2 hours more a day. Women are doing a significantly amount larger of housework and cooking. Let's see, caring for household members, aging grandparents, or aging parents, I should say, usually, or children. Men are doing about half as much as women are doing. Let's go over here to sleeping. Women are doing more sleeping. Men are doing slightly more television watching. Eating is kind of similar. Socializing, same. Women are doing a little bit more grooming. And so add all that up, and that is what women and men on average are doing. Toward gender toward gender balance, looking at different sex couples. So there has been a trend where couples are saying, we want to be equal. We feel like women should be as responsible for money as men. Men should be as responsible for the home and kids as the woman. And so over the past 50 years, we've seen some significant changes. Women are now doing half the housework, or at least married women are doing half the housework. Okay, men have doubled the amount of housework that they're doing, right? So women are cut theirs in half, men doubled theirs, so it's actually equal change, really, in different directions, but so far so good. Married women to married men's amount of housework is still 1.6 to 1, which means if a man is doing 1 hour of housework, a woman is doing 1 hour and 40 minutes or 35 minutes, something like that. Of so she's still doing a significantly amount more. Childcare, the imbalance is still actually worse. It's still bad. It's actually worse than housework. Women are doing twice as many hours as men, you know. Maybe some of that is because women are breastfeeding babies, men can't really do that. But something tells me it's probably more than that. Let's look at why women perform more unpaid labor than men. And so, okay, so looking specifically at different sex couples, heterosexual couples, three explanations. One, maybe men's jobs are making more money and are more intense, and so that is why the women are doing more. Okay. Perhaps the partner with more earnings has more power, and they're using that power to avoid housework, right? Like, so the men are flexing and say, actually, I make $100,000 a year, you only make 70, so that's why you're making dinner and I'm not. There's also the thought that women have been taught that their identity, their role is to iron clothes, and men have not been taught that. Let's look at same-sex couples here because theoretically they haven't been socialized into these men do one thing, women do another because they don't have this dichotomy of, one and the of difference. They're both the same gender, and so how's that going to work out? So among lesbians, it tends to be more equitable, which means they're both partners are doing much more similar amounts of housework, right? Tend to see their relationship as more equal. This is the idea that because same-sex couples cannot fall back on these gender stereotypes, although in many relationships, not all, but there is a sort of more of a masculine member of the couple, and so I wonder if that member of the couple does more of the masculine style things, like taking trash out, working on the outside of the house, making more money, whereas the other one is more feminine and doing more child care and inside housework. One thing to realize here is that same-sex couples are less likely to have children and more likely to have dual earners. So if you look at two couples who are actually making the same amount of money, but one of them is working class and the other one is middle class, the Smiths are working class, the Johnsons are middle class. If one of them stays home, if Mrs. Johnson stays home, but Mr. Johnson makes twice what Mr. Smith does, then what you end up is a situation where they're both bringing home the same amount of money, because remember they both make the same. But because Mrs. Johnson stays home, this family gets 10 extra hours of unpaid work. Moving on. How do we value unpaid work? So there's the thought that maybe if we change the laws and we were paying women to stay at home and provide childcare and clean the home, that would have some positive impacts on society. It is a problem because right now we don't value it in dollar terms, and therefore it's hard for us to value it at all because if Mr. Johnson goes to work as a lawyer and breaks home, $100,000 a year, then we're like, okay, he makes a high income. We got the number. We can kind of play with the number. It makes sense to us. Mrs. Johnson, we're not really sure what she does, and so it becomes easy to not respect that. And because Mr. Johnson makes money, he likely has a lot more power. So if he says, you know what, we need to move to New York because I have a job offer there, and Mrs. Johnson says, I don't want to move to New York. If there's a power struggle there over that, then Mr. Johnson is likely to win because he makes the money. So feminists in the 1970s said, hey, what if we demanded wages for this domestic labor? I'm assuming the government would pay this. This would allow them more choice, more independence, more abilities to be taxed, that they would then receive Social Security benefits from that, and they could potentially organize for better working conditions. By one estimate, if you look at all the unpaid labor in the United States, it's about a quarter of all of the work that is done in the United States in a given year. 23% of GDP. So it's quite a bit, but because we don't value it in dollars, then oftentimes we don't think about it as being worth that much, and so women get less respect. And then if the woman, say, has been a stay-at-home mother for 30 years and her husband leaves her, then she may not get any retirement benefits from those years when she was staying home caring for the kids and her husband, which because her work allowed him to work, but she doesn't get that because unless she gets a divorce settlement, she's might be in a lot of financial trouble. All right, social change. Even among traditional families, things are changing when it comes to housework, meaning women are doing less housework and men are doing more housework and childcare. Although the inequality is a source of family conflict, many spouses justify the division of labor to avoid conflict. This is answering the question of why are women still doing twice the amount of childcare as men are doing, right? And the answer is, well, it's just easier not to fight about it. I also think that women tend to be more caring for other people than, especially mothers, tend to be more caring toward other people about their husbands and their children. And so women are more likely to say, okay, it's fine, just keep doing it. I'll just swallow the consequences and, like live with it. So, um, more there is our relationships are more equal though. Realize that we've come a long way. They are more equal, but still pretty uncommon for men to be homemakers. That kind of that that happens every once in a while, but not that much. In this section, we're going to talk about the conflicts and the solutions when it comes to families and their work, right? And we're going to look at, are there things that we can do that make workplaces a friendlier place for family members to be in so that people don't feel like they have to sacrifice their family in order to be a successful worker, or they have to sacrifice their job in order to be a good parent. This was especially relevant during the COVID pandemic because many of the schools sent kids home to do remote work, and that meant that, at least for the younger kids, a parent had to be home. And so some of those parents were able to take their job and move it home, especially the middle class. But that was extremely difficult even for them because, imagine you got a first grader and he's supposed to be Zooming with his class and mom's supposed to be working remotely for her insurance company. And that's just a tough situation for a kindergartner or first grader to sit in a Zoom class for hours and hours a day without mom's help. And so many mothers found that they were just constantly going back and forth between their job and it wasn't working out. So they ended up leaving the workforce. We had a lot of mothers leave the workforce during COVID. For single parents who are not rich, there appears to not be enough hours in the day to do both earn money, housework, and care for kids without major conflicts. This is really hard, and it's hard for parents. There's dual parents, and so, but I can imagine it would be especially difficult if you didn't have the resource of money nor the resource of another parent to help you with that. It's just really, really hard. Single fathers are more likely than single mothers to have high paying jobs. Their jobs also allow them to have more flexibility. They may have a live in partner, think girlfriend, to help, and the kids tend to be older. Declining welfare support and uncertain employment prospects have created hardships for single mothers. So we've gotten much harder on welfare recipients in the last 30 or 40 years, where we added job requirements or education requirements, volunteer requirements to those, and realized that that has primarily impacted single mothers and their children. So just you can be against it, just realize that who we're talking about are single mothers and their kids. And so if we change things, that's who it's going to impact. It's not going to impact as many deadbeat, dads or, men in their 50s. This is single mothers and their kids who are being impacted by our welfare support or lack of support. Motherhood penalty and fatherhood premium. Okay, so after a couple has a child, women tend to earn less. Okay, fathers tend to earn more than before they were a father. Okay, why are men earning more and women earning less? I think one of the reasons is that women support men and that allows them to be able to get ahead of work. So, for instance, there's a conference coming up in Seattle, and the boss says, "Hey, Joe, I'd like you to go." Well, Joe can go even if he's got a young child. Why? Because his wife is expected to stay at home. Now, Joe's wife, Susie, she also gets asked to go to a conference in wherever. And she can't. Why? Because she's got a young kid at home. Even if the father is home, she is unlikely or less likely to leave him with the children, which is probably some of the reasons why she pays the motherhood penalty. Employer discrimination also plays a role in that. What gives? Okay, so it would be much better if work changed. Some employers have changed and they've said, hey, if you can't come in at 8 a.m. because your kids don't get to school until 8 and you got to drop them off at 7:30, blah, 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 then you can come in at 9 or come in at 10 and maybe work partly from part-time remotely, right? That's great, and some, especially like progressive tech companies, have been about that. But other employers do them either uh, grudgingly, they don't want to do it, but they feel like they have to in order to get good workers. Others don't do it at all, especially in your working class and lower class jobs. They typically are not doing it. Some helpful things might be reducing the work week to from 40 to 34. We could make working hours more flexible. We could offer supports like childcare benefits and time off for family care. The um, the sociologist Judith Lorber says that workplace pressures are thought to be unchangeable. Like we tend to think of our jobs as not changing. Like if I were to ask you, like, hey, what are the odds that McDonald's is going to change to make its workplace more friendly for mothers? Most of you are going to say they're not, right? So we tend to think of them as being unchangeable. So who bears the burden for that? The family does. Okay. And you might say, well, can't the family just bring somebody in to cook dinner or clean the bathroom or something like that? Most people cannot afford that, right? Most people, it's too expensive for most families. Okay, so many families, as to compensate for this, they bring in grandma or uncle who is on disability and can't work anyway, or they try to work a second job doing something different. Some families with young children, they equally share the role of parenting. And so when it comes to work, this means that you're prizing the woman's job as much as you are the man's job. Sometimes this changes when the dad loses his job and he may discover that he actually enjoys staying at home and cooking lunches and things like that for children, but it is still uncommon and is not caught on as a social trend. Meaning we don't have very many stay-at-home dads, and most families still look like the traditional family where mom's still the primary parent and homemaker, and dad's still the primary breadwinner. Because balance is difficult to obtain, people may reluctantly choose to reduce the role of family in their lives by delaying or foregoing marriage and children. This is really sad, I think. That's why I underlined it here. Many people are deciding it's just too difficult. It's just too difficult to have children. We don't see that as much in Southern Illinois, but if you were to go to major cities where the cost of housing is so much higher, what you're going to find is that some people are just like, I just can't be a parent and a worker. And if I'm a parent, I have to work, so I'll just choose not to be a parent. Or I'll just not be a wife. Um, or a husband because I just can't do both of those things. If you look at the most successful women in America, at least financially, look at Supreme Court justices, look at CEOs, many of them have foregone children, like they don't have children or they have very few children. It is rare that you see a leader of a major organization that is run by a woman with 3 or 4 kids. It just doesn't happen very much. Many people feel that their work and their family demands make it difficult to achieve their potential in either area. Most people feel like I'm just shorting both my family and my job, hoping that in the end it kind of works out. All right. We could change the law. That would be great. This law that was passed in 1993 tried to do something, but didn't really do much of anything. I mean, I don't know. We started down the path of trying to make it easier for families to parent by giving them time off when they had a child or adopted a child or had an aging parent that they had to care for who moved into the house. But it was something like, well, you have to work there for a whole year before this counts, and we're not going to pay you while you're off. It's kind of just holding your job in essence. Only one half of all workers are covered because of those requirements. And most of those are people in higher income positions, right? So this is something that holds the jobs for wealthy professionals. We are the only wealthy country that does not guarantee paid leave to parents. And most non-wealthy countries also do it, by the way. We are afraid, I think we're afraid that people are going to take advantage of it and people are just going to start having all these babies just so they can get paid time off, even though in other countries they don't have that problem at all. So all right. The problem with FMLA, Family Medical Leave Act, that was the law we just talked about in 1993, is that it's unpaid. And the problem with being unpaid is, you're getting ready to have a baby, which means your expenses are going up because you're going to the doctor and you're buying all this stuff that is required to have a child, which means your expenses go up and now your pay goes down, maybe to zero if you don't have vacation time. And so that makes people not want to have kids. Half the workers are not even covered by FMLA, and many employers don't like it even as it is. And as a result, poor women often drop out of the labor force after having a baby, and people with better jobs are often able to use their resources, their money, to create a balancing act between their job and their role as a parent. All right. This is the amount of paid leave that different countries have. And so what you can see here is that Northern Europe gives the most and the United States gives the least. Now, obviously, not all countries are included here, but the rich ones are, including the United States, richest country in the world. We have zero. Why? Because we don't demand it. We don't insist that that families um, take We don't insist that politicians pass the law, right? We do then get upset because young people don't want to have kids, right? But we don't necessarily change things to make it easier for them to do that. All right. There's a lot of good news in the story of work and family in the United States. We have increased employment and independence for women. We've got women in doing way more jobs than they were 50 years ago. We're a lot better educated than we were 50 years ago, and children are growing up knowing more about the world than they were before. But there's still some problems. We have gender inequality that is mirrored not only in the workplace where we have women's jobs and men's job, but also in the families. In fact, some people say that we actually have more inequality in the family than we do in the workplace. It causes stress. In fact, I want to say it probably causes a lot of divorces for families because when you're angry and upset and that makes you want to fight more often, not fight physically, but get upset and irate, um, and it feels like the current arrangements are impossible to do well. Like a lot of parents feel like I just can't do this well. This is just too difficult. Maybe they're surviving, but they're not thriving. So, all right, without guaranteed paid family and sick leave, people can't contribute the way they want to at home, and they also cannot contribute the way they want to at work. So between home and work, neither one of those are particularly going well. The government could do things that would reduce the cost to employers. So for instance, the government can say, if you take 3 months off to have a child, and the government will pay you 50% of your salary, right? All right, let's look at the number of hours that the average person works based on the country that they're in. We have the United States here at 1700, but you've got all these successful countries down here that don't work as many hours, but they're still doing fine, including Germany, which is doing a lot less hours than we are, and Germany is considered the workhorse of Europe, right? Japanese companies, they don't work as many hours as we do, right? Finland, France, Austria. All right. Securing high quality, affordable care is a problem for almost all families. I think one of the problems is we haven't professionalized it enough. The government doesn't step in many places the way it does even in rural areas, and so a lot of people just have a really hard time finding affordable, high quality care. It may be affordable, but it may not be high quality, or it might be high quality and unaffordable. This is why economists say if we had universal high-end early childhood education, meaning the government would provide it just like it provides K through 12, it could provide birth through 12, then what that would do is it would equalize, at least to some degree, the opportunities for children. So we know that when children of the middle class show up in kindergarten, they're already ahead of the children of the working class and the lower class in terms of their vocabulary, their fine motor skills, their social skills, things like that. And so by having a high quality early education for those children of the lower class and the working class, then that would give them a leg up so that school is better for them from the beginning. Several states and cities have moved toward this, but COVID-19 was really hard on the childcare industry because people couldn't work because the kids weren't allowed to go in there, and so many of them, they left and got other jobs. Let's look at what some local policy initiatives are. New York City, they expanded their preschool from 19,000 children to 100,000 children. Okay. California implemented paid leave in 2004, and they actually asked the jobs to do it, like the companies had to pay for that. Mm, yeah, the idea is if we all states did it, because what you're going to find is like if you're living in New York City, in some ways you're already at an advantage. If you're living in California, you're already at an advantage, and so it means if you're living in Mississippi or West Virginia, you're at a disadvantage. And so it'd be great if you could extend the advantages from New York City and California to all the states in the Union. So, but I think that is the end of my slideshow. Thank you for watching until the end.